Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along to this Zeald webinar, the fifth in our Keep Calm and Get Digital series. My name is Jarrah, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. We are 3 weeks through this initial lockdown period, and what is becoming clear is that while we may ease restrictions after the 4 weeks is up, the way that we do business is going to have to change. And in fact, I know there's some announcements that have come out this afternoon just talking about what level 3 might look like, and it is going to be quite different to what we used to before the lockdown. And we're still going to have to restrict that contact with people quite a lot. That's why today's topic is so important: radical transformation for survival. We have a fantastic speaker today, Zeald founder and chairman David Kelly. David has been the driving force behind Zeald and many other tech enterprises. He is uniquely placed to offer insight into digital transformation. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Feel free to post questions at any point in time. There's a little Q&A button you'll find, which I'm highlighting here at the moment, down the bottom of your Zoom controller. Feel free to put questions through that channel at any point, and if it's appropriate, I will bring them up while we're in that segment or while David's presenting. Otherwise, we will hold them till the end and answer them during the question and answer section that we do have towards the end of the webinar. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I would now like to invite David to speak and take us through his presentation. Welcome, David. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, should I say. I'm a little bit behind still. Yeah, welcome to today's presentation, and we're talking about something that's very important today. So I'm just going to click present here, so I'm on the right screen. So radical transformation for survival. So I think one of the important things here is the world as we knew it ended in March 2020. And there's a kind of a realization that's really, everyone's starting to get on top of us, and that is that it's not going to end after 4 weeks. It's going to ease, and things might ease up a little bit, but there's still going to be significant restrictions. And how long are they going to go on for? Well, that's anyone's guess, really. But when we do get free of CV-19, we're going to be in a radically different world. Only those businesses that radically transform digitally are going to survive. And really, I personally believe that New Zealand needs a digital revolution. We're going to need to evolve, I guess, right across the board in a digital sense if we're going to do well and we're going to thrive in a post-COVID-19 world. So one of the most important questions is, who is leading the digital transformation of your company? Is it you as the owner, or if you're not the owner, maybe you're the ops manager? So is it you, the owner, or you, the ops manager? Or is it COVID-19? And I think this is the thing that is driving the transformation of many businesses at the moment, as more and more people are coming to the realization of what they have to do if they're going to survive going forward. So one of the first things that I want to talk about today is that speed of change is everything. You don't have the luxury anymore of sitting back, thinking about things, carefully considering everything, because the world and the ground can just shift between your feet so quickly that you just get left behind. And by the time you realize what you need to do, it could be too late. And so it's imperative that you change, and that you change really quickly. So you just don't have that luxury of, let's wait and see what happens. You must act now. So one of the key things is you've got to adapt to a world of working in bubbles. And this is quite a serious mindset shift for all of us, because it's something that we don't really know. So what does it mean? Working from home, I mean, that's quite obvious, but online transactions, small or reduced contact dispatch teams. So you can't have these warehouses full of people picking and packing and packaging up products to be shipped out to people. You've got to move into more smaller dispatch teams. Video consultations are just vital going forward. The whole rise of the cottage industry, so industries that are based out of homes and home offices or remote workshops, things like this. Localization is a huge thing, where rather than major centralized businesses where things are localizing down and you're getting a lot more happening within a smaller community, so that it can happen within that bubble. And even reduce supply chains. So rather than these really long supply chains that go across many different sort of international regions and stuff like that, reducing those down as much as possible. And then finally, even things like click and collect. Where you can actually have the store package things up and so that you can collect it, but in a way that minimizes contact.
David, I actually, thinking about that reducing down to bubbles, a weird thought occurred to me the other day. When's the next time you're going to be able to shake someone's hand?
That's a very good question, isn't it? A
Yeah,
lot of elbow bumps coming up.
Exactly. Like just going through your normal day, and you'd go into different meetings, you'd shake people's hand. It would be a very normal thing to do. And it just actually occurred to me that that light bulb moment. It's like, when's the next time I'm actually going to be able to do that? Just that simple little gesture is kind of gone. And I suppose it kind of typifies that change in mindset, and that adapting to bubbles is that we now have to take into account.
Yeah, it does, and it's a hard habit to change, isn't it? You know, when you've had your whole life, it's kind of just something that's inbuilt to what you do and how you greet someone and something. I remember just, I think it was in the week before lockdown, and had someone turned up here, and I just went out and, shook his hand vigorously, and immediately thought, oh, I shouldn't be doing that.
What have I done?
Yeah, and I went and washed my hands immediately afterwards, but I hope he did as well. Otherwise, he might have been at risk. Thankfully, I didn't have it. But that's a hard habit. These habits are hard to change. It's hard to even get your mind around it, really, because they're just so inbuilt. And that's what so many of these things are that we're talking about here. So yeah, really the future, I believe, is digital plus local. It's this combination of going digital, but also thinking a lot more local. And there's just going to be so many shifts in that respect. And so you want to be thinking in your mind, okay, well, how's that going to change in my industry and my business? Can it become more localized? And if so, what does that mean? What are the ramifications of that? So I think it's really important that you work out how you can serve your local market online. If you're in a business that is just not working for whatever reason, and it doesn't have a future, you don't think, based on what's happening, then what you want to be thinking about is, okay, well, what's the next thing you're going to do? How can you serve your local market, and how can you do it in a digital sense, or using digital technology to enable that? So I guess one of the biggest questions is, how do you start? If you haven't lived digital most of your working career like I have, how do you start? That seems a big leap for a lot of people, but it's not that hard once you know how. So one of the key things is you need to remap your path to purchase. So this is what I mean by that. You write down every step a customer takes to buy from you. And then you identify the steps that currently require face-to-face contact. And then you replace those steps with a digital process, if at all possible. And if you absolutely need face-to-face, then where possible, you want to do it online. Like, often we think we have to have face-to-face, but when we really challenge our thinking, we think, actually, hang on, I probably could do that in a way that's not face-to-face. It could be done over the telephone, or it could be done online in the sense of how we're communicating right now, but in a two-way sense. So often the digital tools needed to do what you're needing to do here, they've been around for a long time. So this is not radical new technology. It's not things that have just sort of emerged in the last couple of months as a result of coronavirus. These tools have been around for a long time, and they're robust, they're stable, they're bulletproof.
And so you're talking, David, there about like e-commerce and video conferencing and things like that. They're not new ideas, but if we can work out how to incorporate these things in to replace that face-to-face, that's how we kind of remap this path to purchase, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, yep, e-commerce, that's been around a long time, right? Video conferencing's been around a long time as well. We've been running remote teams within our organization for over 10 years now. And so those technologies, they're not something that just emerged a year or two ago. Even sort of digital whiteboarding, communicating in a visual sense, like how you would on a whiteboard and things like that. these things are all really robust. And so it goes on and on. There's all sorts of other examples as well. So I thought it might be helpful to look at a little example, and I tried to use something that was maybe not too obvious, but then not too out there as well. Try to find somewhere in the middle. And so let's look at maybe a computer repair service. So this is an essential service, classified as an essential service. And if we really think about this going forward, I think there's going to be, particularly in the next 12 months, maybe longer with the disruption of supply chains and stuff, there's going to be a significant rise in the whole repair industry, not only in computers, but in all sorts of places. So clothing, small engines, it goes on and on. It's vast, right? But one of the key things is if we look at, say, computers and many similar things, you obviously can't repair them online, or you can with computers, you can do some things, but only so much. There's a point where sometimes they need to be physically repaired. So let's look a little bit at that thing. And one of the first points I've just noticed here, or noted here, is that you may have to do it, the customer may have to do it on their phone, right? Because if their computer's broken down, well, they might not have another one. So this might be happening on their smartphone, or maybe it's happening on a second computer in their home. So here's the path to purchase, right? And this is just a simple one, but the customer orders the required service and they pay online. The website then emails a prepaid courier packing slip to the customer with instructions to package up the item and place it in their letterbox or outside their front door or something like that at a specific time for collection by the courier. The website then automatically notifies the courier company to collect the item and deliver it to the service provider. The courier company then collects the item, delivers it to the service provider, and then there probably needs to be some sort of sanitization process or stand down period to just deal with CV-19. And then the service provider completes the service and couriers the item back to the customer. Now in this step 6 here, maybe there's an assessment process, right? So maybe the service provider has to assess, okay, this is the repair that's needed, and there's a bit of communication between them and their client to get approval to do the repair. But the net result of it is at the end, the service provider completes the service, couriers it back to the customer receives the item, and then maybe they need to have a final sanitization process, or worst case scenario, they just sort of leave the item in a safe place, for 3 days or something like that, to make sure that there's no CV-19 risk. So that's a great example of just mapping a path to purchase, and it's very interesting when you look at that, is that there's nothing particularly radical there, right? There's no sort of radical e-commerce process or some rocket science or out there technology. It's all just pretty standard sort of stuff that's been around for a long time.
But the impacts for that repair service is pretty transformative, right? So all of a sudden they've got like items coming in to be delivered, and they've had maybe the initial consultation or review of that item prepaid, and they've got a process and it's all there, and they can get back to work fixing things, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And so the website and the whole digital sort of aspect of things is taking care of a lot of the payment side of things, the logistical side of things. And so this could be done where you can even have multiple people working out of a home workshop, that's set up in their garage. So the obvious one is if you're just one technician or something like that, then fine, that's easy. But there's nothing stopping it. So there might be 3, 4, 5, 10. I mean, it scales as far as you want it to scale, and you can easily put a little bit of intelligence within the website so that it does some sort of round robin assignment, or each person working out of their home workshop has a certain amount of capability, and it gets assigned according to some sort of procedure, So I guess the real key tip here is that you want to remap your path to purchase with digital tools, and you want to sort of sit down and really go through it step by step and ask yourself, how can I make this digital? How can I transform this particular step within my process so that it's digital? Okay, so the next thing I just want to talk about is the explosion of e-commerce. Many people won't be aware that baby boomers are the fastest growing demographic for online shopping. And that's quite a surprise to many. I mean, we all think about the millennials or the digital natives, and things like that. and of course they're online. But baby boomers is just a massive growing demographic. So prior to alert level 4, so before, obviously e-commerce has gone crazy with CV-19, but prior to it even going into lockdown, e-commerce was going crazy. That was just the natural, I guess, change that was occurring. But when lockdown eases, e-commerce, without a doubt, is going to become the primary way that products are sold. And I think there would be very few people that would argue with me on that point anymore.
I think just prior to this webinar, there was actually an announcement from the government around what level 3 will look like if we go to that. I haven't had a chance to digest all of it, but the key takeaway I got is that we're not going back to opening up stores at level 3. And so while there will be some easing of restrictions and the ability for more businesses to start to transact under level 3, they're not going to be able to do it through a traditional retail channel. And so you're just going to see more businesses have to rely on this as their primary pathway for selling products.
Yes, absolutely. And you can kind of see over the coming 12 months and maybe longer where we're going to go down to, level 2, and then we might have to jump up to level 3 for a bit if there's a bit of an outbreak. And, this is going to be a very fluid situation. And so I think it's incredibly important that we don't sort of kid ourselves, really. There's no benefit in doing the whole ostrich effect, I guess, and just putting our head in a hole and pretending it's all going to go away. The sooner we really face up to the reality that we've got in front of us, the better. Yeah.
I actually got a good story for you. Just before we went into alert level 4 and went into lockdown, my next door neighbour came knocking on the door. She stayed back a little bit. But, she did ask, and she's 70 years old, and she asked me to help her sign up for online shopping for the first time. So she'd never had the need or the well, maybe she had the need, but she'd never got around to actually organising, buying, shopping online. And all of a sudden it's forced upon her, that change. COVID-19 was forcing that change. And so she's now been shopping online for the last 3 weeks and hasn't needed any more help. And I imagine she's quite enjoying that process, because it's a lot easier to shop online than it is to go through a busy supermarket with lots of people, or at least go through the hoops you have to go through at the moment, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's going to be enormous behavioural change out of this, won't there? Jara, it's just going to be incredible. And I think in many ways that we don't necessarily even foresee. Like, I know the Prime Minister was talking, I think it was earlier today or yesterday, about some of the positive changes, where people are getting in touch in smaller communities, and families being drawn closer together in some areas and things like that. And there's all these different sort of follow-on things where people, okay, they've been forced to shop online, and suddenly they're discovering, hang on, this is fantastic, I'm not going to go back to the store, and so many different things like that. A lot of people I've heard within my networks have said, there's no way I'm going back to work in the central city office and battling the traffic for another, 4 hours, or sitting in traffic 3-4 hours each day. There's just no way.
You're saying we might have solved Auckland's traffic problems?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? That maybe this was, the solution they were looking for, even though, yes, it's had, some enormous negative consequences as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say thanks to Shaz for a question. We'll address that shortly when we get to the Q&A section. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Okay, so yeah, so some one of the interesting things as well is with lockdown, some e-commerce sites that have been able to trade in lockdown have been just shut due to overwhelming orders. And I mean, this is just one example of one of our clients, King Seeds, and they just had to close the doors for a little bit, and they put up a message on their website, as you can see here. Wow, you've been busy, and now we need to catch up, and this is the thing. They're just overwhelmed with demand.
Yeah, they opened it back up again. I think it was Tuesday night, actually, and the first thing in the morning, by about 9 o'clock, they'd had 65 orders. So,
okay, yes.
Yeah, so they managed to get back on top of it. Now they're getting heaps of orders again. So.
Yeah, that's right. And they could just end up going through these multiple sort of yo-yos of opening the doors for a little while, and then because it's a struggle, isn't it? So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. There's definitely a lot of businesses struggling, but then there's businesses that are fulfilling a real pertinent need right now, and are able to do so even within the lockdown restrictions. And so yeah. So I guess the key thing to understand is the time to get online is now. It's really important. An online sales channel will allow you to operate effectively across the alert levels. And as I mentioned just a bit before that, we must be prepared for alert levels to go up and down over the next 6 months. I think it's very foolish to think that it's just the alert levels are going to come down, the world will go back to the way it was, and everything will be back to normal. I think that's extremely unlikely. It really is. And, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't see it, that's for sure. So the Get eCommerce movement.
This is actually going to answer Jason and Les's questions, actually. So, yeah, I'll let you go, but I just wanted to acknowledge those questions. I think we've got you covered right here.
Okay. So the Get eCommerce movement is something that we started, I think, 2 weeks ago. It feels like about 2 months ago, because every day's felt like a week. It's been an incredibly busy time, where we basically set up a CV-19 digital transformation fund for SMEs, and we were offering SMEs a free website. And so what we've been doing is we've been offering SMEs in certain industry sectors, small to medium-sized enterprises, right, and in certain industry sectors, a free e-commerce website to help them achieve digital transformation. We're extremely passionate about seeing and facilitating digital revolution within New Zealand, because we passionately believe that this is what needs to happen if New Zealand is going to really survive and thrive through CV-19, and be in a great position economically to do as well as it can going forward. And the sooner we, achieve that transformation, the better for the country. So we've got our sort of e-commerce packages that we often, that we've done a huge amount of over the years. And so we've taken that package. It's worth, in the past, it was worth over $7,000 just prior to CV-19, and then have been offering those out to businesses within certain industry sectors. And slowly we're expanding the range of industry sectors that we can offer. We've really challenged ourselves to really achieve a deployment target of 2 working days, and this has been a massive challenge for us, because it used to take several weeks to deploy an e-commerce website, but speed of implementation is everything now, right? Speed of change is everything. And so that's something that we've been achieving, which has been really pleasing. And we're offering also free hosting for 12 months on these websites, with the only cost really being a small success fee, so a 2% success fee for the business on the transactions that are going through their website. So their idea is that if a business, we're trying to de-risk it for businesses, essentially, so that they can get online. They don't have to worry about the cost of setting up the website. They don't have to worry about the cost of hosting. And then they only pay a small fee if they're successful in doing that. So as I've said, tailored packages for your industry. So we're doing it by industry segment. We started with food and beverage. We moved then to medical supplies. We've done a lot of work in the repair sort of industry with the rise of the whole, repairs and what we believe is going to be happening there. And then also have done some stuff in general retail and things like that. And we've got a whole bunch more that are well on their way. 2% success fee, I've already talked about. And so with higher volume businesses, if you go online, you end up wildly successful, then there's a way to reduce that success fee by moving to our packages, our hosting packages that are optimized for higher volumes and higher levels of transactions. So questions, I'll hand that over to you, Jarrah.
Cool. So the first thing probably is worth mentioning, we've got a couple of questions there from Jason. Is there any funding as well as mentoring that you know of to help kickstart an e-commerce business? And so I'll quickly do that, and that is that the Zeald team are obviously offering this Get e-commerce movement with the free website setup, and so that will certainly help and kind of acts as funding. We've set up that funding initiative off our own bat, and we also have a team of strategists who can help support you try and make the most out of that website as well. And then Les has got a concern about the e-commerce providers are going to put their prices up outside the realms of small to home businesses. Well, I think we've probably answered that one as well, in that we're certainly not doing that. We're actually making it even easier for people to be able to get online. So if you've got any other questions, feel free to send them through. And what we'll do now is got a few other questions just for you, David. This Get e-commerce movement is pretty monumental. We're talking about 500 websites that would have been worth $7,000. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of resource to throw at something like this. What got you started down this path? What kicked this off?
Yeah, well, it was just sort of leading up to coronavirus, really, and as you know, Jarrah, we moved Zeald quite quickly. We felt that this was going to be a major, and so we moved our entire staff right across 2 countries into a full home working setup. So everyone migrated into home, got set up really well with multiple monitors and all the rest of it, well before lockdown occurred. And because we felt it was heading in that direction regardless. So I think it was 1.5 weeks before lockdown occurred, we were completely at home. Everything was bedded in, and everything was working really well. And it was at that point, though, we were also starting to get a lot of calls. Like when I say we, I'm meaning frontline staff at Zeald. You were, Jarrah, I was even, and we're getting calls from people, and there was people were essentially just saying, help. What do I do? This is, my business is falling off a cliff, or this is occurring, that's occurring. I need to rapidly transform my business, and I need help. And so we were looking at that, and the more we sort of looked at that and saw that occurring, the more we were thinking, this is incredible. What's occurring here, and really, when we step back at this, New Zealand needs a digital revolution, right across the country, within the regions, within the towns, within the communities, and within the cities as well. And so we're looking, well, how can we help support that? Because we can see there being a real problem with web developers being just overwhelmed. And we really felt that Zeald as an organisation, we have been always engineered for volume, for doing a huge volume of work. And so we felt that we're in a pretty unique position to help. And so we really set a challenge for ourselves to say, well, how can we help? What can we do to really help businesses achieve this? We're in a very fortunate position as a business because we almost through sheer luck are in an industry where there's an exploding need, for our services. And so we thought, well, what can we be doing to help with that? And so we really challenged ourselves and said, is there a way we can de-risk it for businesses that are needing to go online where they already have massive financial pressure on themselves? And how can we do that? And how can we maybe retool our production lines so that we can roll these e-commerce websites off really quickly? And so one of the ways we found is, well, let's go industry segment by industry segment, right? Let's take a segment like, say, food and beverage, and let's work out what a really solid website looks like, an e-commerce website in that segment. And let's pre-design it. Let's pre-design it, pre-produce it, and get it so that it's a really solid website. We're not aiming for a Rolls Royce. We want a Toyota, something that's going to be reliable, dependable, hopefully never ever let you down. That kind of level of solution. And let's pre-design it, pre-produce it, and then offer it. If we can get it so that we can offer essentially for no setup fee, no hosting fee, and just a success fee. Then that would be very powerful because that gives people the opportunity to really get online. And so that's what we did. And long story short, that's what we've done. And that's what we're frantic doing now as well, as we've because we've just had an enormous explosion of people needing these things. Mm-hmm. And so we're going like crazy to make sure we deliver within those, those 2-day deployment targets as well.
Yes, I think that's just from my point of view, it's probably good to clarify that 2-day deployment target is when we've got all the content that we need to be able to do it. So there's some questionnaires and things, and we need a certain level of information before we can turn around our bid in 2 days. It can take a little bit longer than that, but from an internal point of view, we can do that piece in 2 days. So I've actually got just a fantastic comment come through from Robin, and it's not really a question, it's just a statement. And she's just said, I've just been through the process with the website set up, and the Zeald support team have been really great, totally recommend them. And so thank you for Robin, I appreciate you passing on those kind words. Got a question from Simon here. Are there still opportunities in the 500 free or substituted website positions for food and beverage related businesses, in brackets a cafe? So have we still got spaces for cafes?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And look, from our perspective, 500 is just the start. we're gearing up as a company to deploy thousands, if not tens of thousands of e-commerce websites. That's what we believe that we need to do as an organisation to support the digital revolution that needs to occur within New Zealand. Our struggle is how can we fund these things? And so, we're looking at different avenues to see if we can partner with other organisations. We know that as an organisation, we can partner 500. We might be able to fund more as we get even more efficient with things that we're doing. But we're also looking out to other organisations, and we're hopeful, that other organisations are going to come on board and really support us in this. So definitely, there's still websites available for food and beverage businesses, and also other industry segments.
Okay, cool. And so, yeah, Kate's just sent through a message as well, just saying she's tried to go through the process and sadly didn't qualify, and so does have to pay to get a website. And so just to clarify once again, to start with, we're working on some very strict verticals that are essentially essential businesses at the moment. And as we create more templates, correct me if I'm wrong here, David, but as we create more templates and look after more verticals, we will be able to accommodate more different types of businesses as we go through this.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so we're sort of trying to work through as many industry segments as we can, but we've prioritised the essential services to start off with. And that's probably been the hardest thing. We've had this huge influx of people sort of still saying, I need help, please, can you help? And there's only sort of so far you can go so fast anyway.
Yep.
But we are working very hard as fast as we possibly can to try and get it so that we can widen the different industry segments that we're supporting.
Cool. So we've got thank you, David. And so we've got a couple more questions here that are really, I think, based around people from different industries trying to work out how they can kind of transform here. And so I've got one from Shaz. She's saying, how about a hair cut and colouring service? Like, how do you transform that? And that's a really good question, right? Like the actual service itself requires a bit of a bubble there. Have you got some thoughts? Or I've got a couple.
I'm sure you do, yeah. And I've got a couple as well. So maybe if we just brainstorm it a bit together, Jared. But
okay. Awesome. Well, the first thing I'm seeing with most service businesses like that can't actually physically do the process at the moment, they're selling vouchers, and they're also pre-booking and creating a queue of people. And right, so as soon as they are able to deliver the service, they've got people that have prepaid, and they've got people that are ready to go. Because I tell you what, there's a few people out there, myself included, that could do with a haircut sometime soon, right? And so if you're pre-selling vouchers for it, or pre-booking places that don't necessarily have a specific date on it, but just as soon as I can start operating, you're first in the queue, then you can actually get some revenue in and start planning for when things reduce in terms of restrictions. So that's my first thought. But did you have something there, David, as well?
Yeah, the first thoughts that sort of came to my head was you've got to think about how you're going to adapt that service. And so one of the key words, right, is risk minimization. And so how can you minimize the risk the way that things are looking like going forward? And so that is things like, okay, I need to reduce contact with my clients. So obviously, I've got to cut their hair. But maybe we can have it so that payments are automated. There's not everyone using the FPOS machine and things like that. We can put in place like procedures where when people come to get the haircut, there's a strong sanitisation process that both parties go through in order to make sure that things are as clean as they can be and as sanitised as they can be. And then I guess things, like almost getting a little bit like we can take prompts from medical in terms of face masks and things like that. I know there's still a lot of debate as to whether they're effective or not effective. And so that's something that you'd want to look into a little bit more. But maybe there's, different precautions like face masks and things like that that can be done while you're actually delivering the service to be minimizing risk as well. And so I think it's a matter of really thinking through, like we talked about the path to purchase. And so we've got to think about that. That's very important. But then there's also the delivery process as well. And there's a bunch of that we can do there to adapt, even in some of the most tricky industries. And this is one of the real tricky ones where, there's only so much you can do before physically you have to be doing something for the person. It's not like they can sort of take their hair off and send it to you or something like that. That would make things a lot easier if you could. But
you're basically saying we're all going to wigs.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Worst case scenario maybe, but then hairdressers might be struggling.
Yeah.
And barbers,
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, and this is something I've touched on with a few people that I've talked to as well over the last couple of weeks, is instead of just having your normal business plan and your health and safety plan, you're actually going to have like a sanitation plan, right? So this is the processes that you go through every day to protect your customers from spread. And also, I suppose there'll also need to be really good record keeping as well to make sure that if there are any outbreaks, that contact tracing is really easy as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the businesses that jump on that quicker are the businesses that people are going to feel more comfortable with using, to get the service done. And so that needs to be a key thing that you're promoting within your business, that we're doing this and we've got these sort of things in place. Because, sometimes New Zealanders especially can be a little bit backward in coming forward, and so people might be uncomfortable with asking and things like that. But if you've got that information right there out up front on your website and things like that, it can build a lot of credibility, a lot of trust with your prospective clients and your existing clients as well.
Yeah, so we actually got a flood of questions coming through. So I think we've got about another 4. I might need to just go, we'll answer those ones because otherwise we're going to run massively over time. So I've got one from Liz here who said, how do you see digital transformation being applied to an accommodation provider like a hotel or a motel where it's an experience? And so I think we've touched on a couple of things there, especially around that sanitation piece. Do you have some initial thoughts there, David, on that, how that industry is going to pivot or need to pivot?
Yeah, well, I know you've got quite a lot of thoughts on this as well, Jared, just with when me and you've been throwing ideas around together. But I know one of the things is accommodation's quite driven by tourism, obviously, and so that's a real challenging aspect for them, particularly those accommodation providers that are very, in the past, that's where most of their clientele has come from. But going forward, obviously, tourism is going to be a lot more about domestic tourism, I believe, rather than international tourism. And so that's one of the first things is organisations like that, they need to very quickly sort of switch their focus to a more domestic market rather than an international market which would have been, the more lucrative market in the past. So that's one of the first things that come to my mind. I've got some other thoughts, but maybe I'll pass it over to you, Jared.
Yeah, well, I've actually been talking to a few people in this space already, and so that domestic market is definitely where it's at. The thing that I suppose I can predict, I suppose, and is that we're all been locked up in these bubbles for quite some time, and so eventually we're going to get to the point where restrictions do start to reduce and we can start to travel. Everyone's going to want to go on holiday, right? And they're not going to be able to go overseas, or they're not going to want to go overseas. So we are going to see a real boom in domestic travel and booking of accommodation and things like that, that the likes of which we probably haven't seen. All right, people don't, the costs associated with overseas travel dropped so much over the last few years that overseas was often a first choice for a lot of people, and so that's not going to be there for them anymore. And so that domestic market is going to be significantly different to what it's been in the past, and pivoting to getting ready to be able to capture that market is probably what I would suggest for most accommodation providers, what they should be looking towards.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. And so
I think
online bookings and stuff like that, obviously.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's quite important is that I think there's going to be a lot of talk about when you actually go outside of your bubble, you can kind of go outside of your bubble, or you can go outside of your bubble. Do you know what I mean? And that your bubble can expand by a factor of 1 million, or it can expand by a factor of 1.2 or something like that. And so I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on how do you minimize the expansion of your bubble. So if you're going to go outside of your bubble, let's say you're going to go and stay somewhere, is that accommodation provider able to minimize the expansion of your bubble so that it only expands by a small factor? And I think organisations that really promote that and are able to explain how they are able to do that, by minimising contact with different other people within the facility and things like that, that's going to be a very powerful thing as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so so as we start to get more freedom, there's going to be two driving factors. One is that we're going to be requested to reduce our contact, but you're also going to have to keep in mind that people are going to get used to being in their bubbles as well. So there's going to be a desire from people, actually, even once all the restrictions are gone, to keep their bubbles small too. And so it's driven by two factors from either direction, if that makes sense. And so we're going to need to kind of accommodate that desire from people to stay separated, even if they are traveling. That's a good point. Right, so we've got a couple more questions here. How do we, the inexperienced SME owner, know that what the best setup is done for a website that will make sales? I've been bitten twice by a couple of larger e-commerce businesses. I've got a quick answer for that, actually, because we've got a webinar next week on Wednesday, which is the basics of setting up an e-commerce site. So how to go through that process and set one up for success. And so we've got a whole webinar on that specific topic scheduled for Wednesday next week. And if you would like to join us for that, we've got registration details on our website in our webinar series, zeald.com. Go to the main page and find your way to the webinar page, and you'll be able to register there if you like. I believe the Chamber are also, Tauranga Chamber of Commerce are also got registrations from their website too. So, right, so any ideas of how you can help the automotive industry?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, isn't it?
And
I guess it's got lots of, there's different aspects of the automotive industry. There's obviously automotive sales, there's automotive servicing, you can get right down to things like auto electricians, and you get heavy machinery, so is it trucks, servicing and all of that kind of stuff. And so depending on which industry it is, it obviously varies quite a lot.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about this the other day, and I think we've talked about it as well. It's just that if you go back to that path to purchase, what's the process that someone goes through to buy, right? So if you're going to buy a car, you'd often go into a lot and walk around different vehicles and check out different bits and pieces, and then take it for a test drive. Now that test drive piece is going to be quite challenging, unless there's a way to sanitize and make it very easy for people to know that the vehicle that they're about to drive is well sanitized and maintains their bubble. But in the interim, video conferencing and the ability for a car agent to walk around and show someone around a vehicle using technology is actually a simple little step that could be taken to really open up that product discovery process, like that experience that someone has when they go onto a car yard and get shown around. You could actually replace that with a digital video conference quite easily, especially on a cell phone or something like that. Show someone around a vehicle. It could be a pretty straightforward process.
Yeah, and maybe if I can just comment a little bit on the more servicing side of things in the industry. And I think when you look at sort of mechanics or auto electricians or things like that, really when you look at those businesses, what they need to do is they need to be able to facilitate delivering their service whilst maintaining as much as they can people staying within their bubbles. And so they've got to kind of rethink about that whole process once again of how people are purchasing, how people are how they're then delivering the service. And so I think it's really important that when you look at those sort of industries, a lot of it revolves around bookings, right? And they book people in to do work at certain times and stuff like that. And so they want to get, I think, a bit more transparent with how their bookings works. Ideally, they want to get that online, allow people to then book in certain slots and things like that. And then in terms of delivering the service, looking at how they can minimize, once again, the interaction and maximize the ability for people to stay in their bubbles. And so that might involve a bit more of sort of picking up vehicles, and when you're picking up vehicles, going through a sanitization process, having some real clear procedures with that, dropping vehicles off afterwards, or if it's the client dropping it off to your place, again, having a way that they can kind of drop off, don't have to have any interaction, so to speak. The vehicle's sanitized, serviced, then re-sanitized, and then left in a place, once again, where the people can minimize interaction in order to sort of complete that process. So it just involves, I think, challenging many of our long-held fundamental almost beliefs as to this is how an auto electrical business must operate. This is how a mechanical servicing type business must operate. It's really challenging those, long held sort of preconceptions that it's got to be like this, it's got to be like this. No, hang on, it doesn't have to be like that. There's some other ways it could be done that could really help facilitate things. And I think it's the businesses that adapt quickly are the ones that are going to thrive so much more.
And it, as you rightly point out, it's just an adaptation, and it doesn't need to be, in some cases, Well, it's a change. It doesn't need to be too extreme, and it can involve some very simple pieces of technology. Like just as a small example, my father-in-law is a GP, and he had a lot of people coming in to get referral forms to get tested for COVID-19. And what he was finding is that those referral forms he was giving to the patients, they weren't being accepted by the people at the testing stations because they didn't want to take a piece of paper from somebody that was going to be tested for COVID-19. That didn't work for them. And so what he did is he actually printed out the referral forms, filled them out, had a map on the back side of the referral form, put them into a Ziploc bag, and then taped them to the driver's window of the car so that the driver had the map of where to go on the inside, and then on the outside it had messaging saying this form hasn't been touched by the patient. And so then the testers were able to get the referral form very easy from inside that Ziploc bag. And so that's a Ziploc bag and a couple of pieces of sellotape, and you've actually managed to maintain bubbles within that environment quite effectively. And so it's just that creative and adaptive thinking that's required to kind of help us change the way we do business, right?
It's the easy things, isn't it? The simple, elegant solutions. Those are the things that seem to always work the best. And when you really turn your mind to it, it's amazing what type of solutions come out, and usually quite quickly, and they can make an enormous difference within a business very quickly.
Yeah. So I did promise one question, one like we would go through 4 questions. I've got one last one that we can just address because it's quite quick. And so thanks for everyone's patience there. We've kind of gone over time a little bit. I've got someone from Sheng who said, I'm in the construction and engineering consultation sector. Do you have a time frame for the same solution to be extended out to non-essential businesses, perhaps post-lockdown? And so, yeah, did you want to talk to us a little bit? It's a pretty tricky one, eh?
That's a tricky question, all right, and we don't want to set expectations and disappoint people. I guess the key thing is we're giving it everything we have, really, and we're working really, really hard to try and expand the different industry segments that we can help and support. But there is an enormous volume flooding through the door as well. So can't really commit to specific timeframes. I can just communicate intent is the best that I can do at this stage.
Yeah, so if you go to the Zeald website, we've got the landing page for the GEM or Get E-commerce Movement Initiative. And so it does have a bunch of verticals that we're looking to deploy templates for in the first instance. And there's a few that are already open for applications and some that are coming soon. If you have an area that you'd like us to consider for the initiative, then there is a form that people can fill out. Is that right, David? And
yeah,
so,
an email address that they can send to, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, so if you have something like that you'd like us to consider, please send it through. We're looking at every single one of them and doing the best that we can to work through as many industries as we possibly can. That is actually kind of all we've got time for. So I've got a little bit of a wrap up here for you. And if I just share that, there we go. I've got a little bit of overview to present to you there as well. So here's what we know. Right, things are not going back to normal at the end of this lockdown. We found that out today with the announcement that even level 3 has some pretty stringent restrictions on it, and businesses are going to have to change how they do business to survive. Right, and you've got to try and work about to how do you maintain these bubbles even as the restrictions start to reduce. So the opportunity in a lot of cases that introducing digital tools, like we've talked about today, are actually going to improve productivity and actually improve profit margins and actually help you do better. And a lot of these tools have been around for a while and so are quite well maintained and quite mature technologies. So our prediction is that businesses that work out ways to operate with reduced or no contact will be more successful. All right. I think we made that statement last week and even today that rings even more true with the announcements that we've had. And so our recommendation is that the best time to get trading online was before this crisis, but the second best time is really right now. So a little bit about Zeald. We've helped over 15,000 businesses transform digitally over the last 20 years. So we've been doing this for a while. If you would like support with your digital transformation, we do have a free strategy session that is available with our team of experienced digital business strategists. If you would like to take us up on this offer, just let us know in the feedback form that we'll be sending out after this webinar. We will be running webinars like this once or twice a week as we share our top tips for you to adapt and evolve in this challenging time. Our next webinar is actually tomorrow on lead generation in transformational times by Zeald strategist John Homer. He'll be our guest speaker. So join us for this webinar on Friday. That's tomorrow at 2 o'clock. David mentioned that Zeald has launched this Get E-commerce movement. We're helping 500 Kiwi businesses. I think we've got 300 application spaces left in that initial 500. And so if you want to launch an e-commerce website for free, then go to that page and register. We feel that this is the best way that a lot of SME businesses can survive through this crisis, and we want to do our bit to help. So go to zeald.com for more details. Special thanks to David for joining us today. And that's all we have time for, folks. If you missed part of this webinar or would like to see it again, we will be posting a video of it on YouTube. And if you know anyone that might benefit from attending these in the future, please feel free to share the link to register. Apologies for those questions we didn't quite get to today. I have taken a copy of them and I'll try and get back to you at a later date. Wish you all a good day and good luck during the rest of this lockdown.